just have a conversation kind of in between. But if there is anything that you really want to drive home, just right at the camera there. So,
okay.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to Alabama Care. Today we have Mrs. Stephanie Holley of Families Undefined, and we're going to be talking about navigating resources in the disability community. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over. Mrs. Holley, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Holley, and I am the co-founder and president of Undefined.
And are you originally from Alabama?
I am not. I grew up in Ocala, Florida, and I came here about 12 years ago now, and we love it.
Was it school that brought you here, or
It
work?
was school. I went to the University of Alabama for undergrad and my master's. I got my master's in social work, but I always lived in Birmingham and commuted because I worked in Birmingham and just stayed.
I love it here. I've been here for 5 years. I love this part of the country and the people in Alabama. One of the first questions that I had coming across a state line was, who's your team? And I knew I was like in Alabama country there. But so University of Alabama then is Roll Tide.
Yes, absolutely. My husband's not here, so we can say that.
Now is he Auburn?
He is absolutely Auburn. Yes, his whole family.
Iron Bowl day. Gets tense. So introduce us to Families Undefined and what exactly that is, some history there and the concept behind it.
Yes. So being a parent of a child with special needs, very quickly realized that there was not a hub of resources. So basically at every stage, that question of what now, where do we go, what's out there? And that was kind of the hardest part for me, is when we would be faced with a new obstacle or a new milestone or a new setback that we thought, okay, now we need to implement something new in his life or implement some sort of therapy or intervention. The most challenging part is when I felt like I didn't have the answer. So you're already kind of going through this process where you have a lot of grief and you have a lot of anxiety, and it can sometimes be overwhelming. But even though your situation doesn't change, when you are presented with information and options, you feel a little bit empowered. Like, okay, this isn't great, but we have a plan.
You have a game plan. Yeah.
Yes. And so I thought, I want to change that. I want to change that for other families and give them a place where, again, we can't change their situation or make it easier, but we can say, here's all the information available to you. You know, Birmingham actually has a lot of resources for the disability community. It is a blessing to be here. And I feel like even me in my role, I learn something new every day, and it's astounding. And I think if parents or individuals or families knew what was available to them, it could be beneficial in this journey.
Yeah, because you can type in the words on Google and try and find relevant information, but it's a ton of information. And you're not sure if you're at the right spot or if this is exactly it. It's like trying to figure out something new and not having the right words to Google. But if you were to ask an expert, like, hey, I'm trying to figure out this problem, and they're like, oh, type in these keywords and then the solution comes up, so kind of making that easier for families in Alabama.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned there were a couple stages where it was like with your son where new things had to be introduced, whether that's therapy. Can you go over some of those stages there?
Yes. So our son, our oldest child of 3, he has a rare genetic disorder called Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. When he was first diagnosed, there were about 500 individuals in the world that had this. Now we're up to about 1,000 individuals with the same diagnosis, so very rare. It had been discovered relatively recently, not a lot known about it, and the path to get him a diagnosis was a challenging one. So I started to realize pretty early on that something was not developing typically with our son very early, and brought this to our pediatrician, and he did not share those same concerns. And I felt as if I was constantly going to our pediatrician saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing, something is just not right, and him saying, it's fine, he's fine, I don't have any concerns. So for most people, and this kind of leads into the path of how we, developed Undefined as well, for most parents, they rely on their pediatrician as that hub, as the person who's going to guide them in every direction of what should I do next for my child and for their development? So if you don't get that information there, you may not ever hear of this information of what's out there. So eventually I decided, when our son was about a year old, I thought, I hate that I'm right, but I know deep down that I'm right. I wish my pediatrician were right, but he's just not. And he is not going to guide me in this process. And so I've got to take matters into my own hands. Well, I was very fortunate that in my undergrad and my master's work, I worked as a nanny. And so I had worked with children that had received early intervention. So I had heard of these places just by sheer luck. So then I tried to look them up on my own. And again, it was a little difficult to navigate. So I reached out to those moms and they kind of walked me through the process. Okay, this is how you get an evaluation. This is who they'll see. If I had not just coincidentally had those circumstances, he would have never received early intervention, because I would have had no idea what was out there or what my options were. And I didn't even know you could do these things without your pediatrician giving you a referral.
And it's so important. The stats say that early intervention works, and
Yes.
the sooner the better. I have heard other stories where it's families saying, I don't necessarily agree with the doctors here, and I feel like we're not being listened to. My grandparents, I have a family member, my aunt, but I remember my grandmother saying, I disagree with the pediatricians. My aunt would constantly throw up, wouldn't keep food down, wouldn't nurse, those kinds of things. And she's like, something's off here. And the doctors were like, no, she'll grow out of it. And she never did, but she always had that gut feeling. And my grandfather did too. And they went after those extra services. Now, the services looked different 57 years ago. But it takes a lot for a mom and a family to say no to a doctor when they've been in the field for a long time.
It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah. To say, I don't think that's right. And it's a blessing that you had that experience being a nanny and working with other individuals and having connections with moms, because you knew about those services and got involved in them. Now, what organizations provided those services?
Yes. Oh, sorry. This makes my heart happy to be able to talk about these places. So the Bell Center for Early Intervention right here in Homewood really became our core support system for our son. There is truly nothing like it in terms of early intervention. So we did go through the state, and they're wonderful, and they will provide services for free. So if a parent feels that their child might be developmentally delayed, they can go through the state, be evaluated. If the child has a certain level of delays in enough of the 5 areas of development, they will qualify for services. And if the child qualifies for services, the state will come out. So that is huge, and that is a blessing. The great thing about the Bell Center, you don't have to have any level of deficit or delay for them to accept your child. So it could even be something small that you just want to, tackle head on and say, well, why not? They're just having an issue with feeding or a small speech delay, but this is something we want to go ahead and take on. There is nothing too little or too severe that the Bell Center will not treat. And so, and they have a team. So John Wesley had his own team of therapists that worked with him. They were constantly in communication with us. We were drowning at that point. We felt like the wind had just been taken out of our lungs. We were just still catching our breath from, okay, this really is happening. This child that we had a totally different vision for his life, it is not going to be that way. And so this is what we're seeing, but this is what we can do. So they were really kind of our lifeline during that period.
Yeah. And at what age did your son start to receive those services?
He started at the Bell Center when he was 15 months old.
Okay.
And stayed till he was 3.
Yeah. So that's a great starting point right there.
Huge.
There's something that you just said that my grandfather said. The very first broadcast that I ever did, it wasn't even live. have any of this equipment. I had one little recorder, and it was my grandparents and I wanted to record the conversation asking about my family member so that I would always have record and the family could go back and hear our grandparents speak. But my grandfather said, your son or daughter can have a great life. It may not be the life that you envisioned for them, but they can have a great life. And getting those early intervention and getting connected in the support network helps you see that, those changes and get you grounded in what that future is going to look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned online that Lakeshore, or after the Bell Center, let's kind of go through some of the organizations. So up until 3, your son was at the Bell Center. Then what kind of after that?
So when a child turns 3, they age out of early intervention and they transition to the school system. It will look different depending on the school system you're in, how logistically that's laid out, how often they go, how they receive their services. But when a child turns 3, they transition to the school system. We are in the Homewood school system, and so John Wesley transitioned into a preschool program that was half of the class were what they call peers. So
it's like an integrated
yes.
setting.
So children that did not have the same delays that he could hopefully model after. Mm-hmm. And that was great. And he started out going 3 days a week, and then he went 5 days a week, and he received speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all within that system. We also did some private methods. We did child's play where he received speech, and we also went to the Lakeshore Foundation for swim lessons, but it helps with other things too.
Yeah, we love the Lakeshore Foundation. Mm-hmm. My aunt is a member of Lakeshore.
Okay, yes.
And she has difficulty getting around. So when she gets in the pool, it's like the only time that she can get around on her own because of the weightless and the buoyancy mm-hmm. there. But the community at Lakeshore is very inviting and welcoming.
It is great. So the other co-founder, Allie, who could not be here today, that is where she and I met. And she has a son with cerebral palsy, and we met at the Lakeshore Foundation.
What age was it? You guys that kind of met, or was it your sons that kind of hit it off?
Well, so our sons definitely know each other and they interact in parallel, but it was definitely us that made the connection.
Yeah.
Yes. Both Ben, her oldest, and John Wesley, there's not a lot of peer interaction for either of them. They're aware of their peers and sometimes they acknowledge their peers, but they don't rely very heavily on those peer-to-peer relationships.
Yeah. But it'll be nice to have that friendship. So my aunt will sometimes do community outings with another individual that receives services, whether that's to the zoo or whether that's to the botanical gardens, those types of things. And I think just having a familiar face when you're going somewhere. So I hope that those two, are continuing to be around each other and do outings together, because even if you're not, they have their own communication style. It may not look like others, but having someone familiar there on those outings really helps out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So you guys met at Lakeshore. How long ago was that? Or how long was it from Lakeshore meeting to you guys saying, hey, these resources really need to be out there and online?
I think about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And then we pulled in another dear friend. She has a daughter with Williams syndrome. She's on our board. She is very involved in the community, in the Williams syndrome community, and she's a huge advocate for her daughter. So we just knew she would be the perfect fit to be a part of this.
So you have two founding members and a team of 3 that are all moms that have gone through this and are continuing to navigate what disability means in Alabama. And I imagine if there's a new mom out there that has an infant, they would want to call you, and you could help navigate them through that.
Absolutely, yes.
So I hear a lot of there's a ton of information out there, but it's hard to navigate. How did you guys start thinking about like categorizing this stuff on your website and how best to present the information?
Mm-hmm. So that was probably the most tedious and grueling process. We wanted to make sure that if we were going to offer this, that it was going to be effective. So it was truly hours and hours. So first you just make a list of every place you know of, and then what places has she heard of and what places has she heard of? And then it's asking people in the community, and then it's going through online and trying to find anything that we haven't heard of. Well, then once you compile all those places, a lot of them, we don't know through and through. So it is spending an hour, 2 hours on their website, really trying to understand. And that kind of side note, when you're Googling as a parent and you're overwhelmed and you read these amazing mission statements, they're moving, but sometimes you still don't understand. Okay, so logistically though, what does this offer? Yeah. So we wanted to summarize that on the website so parents could look at it and just get a very real concept of, okay, if I go here, this is what it offers for my family or for myself. So then it was making sure all contact information on their sites was up to date. So we weren't giving people out-of-date contact information. So calling hundreds of organizations.
Yeah.
We're compiling this hub of resources. We're just making sure this is your correct phone number. Is this still your address? Is this the best way for someone to email you? So that was kind of the process. It took a very long time. But I do have a really neat story about how our website was put together.
Please.
So we have just had so many little blessings all throughout where you start to think to yourself, who am I to do this? This is huge, and I cannot tackle this. I'm not smart enough. I don't have all the resources, all the things. This is just not meant for me to do. So we tried to create the website on our own because, as I'm sure you know, building a website is expensive and takes a lot of smart people.
Yeah, I've tried it. It's way over my head.
Yes. So we tried to build our own website and it was just terrible, but we thought, okay, this is a starting point. So a friend of mine who was starting his own business had been interviewing different tech companies to build his website. Mm-hmm. And in talking, he realized that the owner of this company had a child with special needs. And he said, oh, I have this friend. This is what she's doing. And he said, listen, we want to build their website free of charge. This is needed in this area. We're going to build their website.
That's amazing.
So Nick the marketer, was a huge project. Our website, and I'm not saying this for credit to us or me, our website is incredible. And it is all because of them. They spent so much time making it beautiful, making it easy to navigate, and they did not charge us a thing. And without them, online is such a big part of everything today. And so without that website, we would essentially be reduced to social media and not have, again, that hub of resources where you can just go search by keyword, scroll through the directory, separated by category. So they really bless this community with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I hear stories like that all the time of families coming together. So like with Hannah, we were talking about earlier, Charlie May's first day. Mm-hmm. I heard a story that, she was struggling to find a publisher, or maybe it was an artist to kind of do the thing. And she finally found somebody that also had a son or daughter, wow. And they really connected over that. It's a very similar story of families coming together and making a difference in the disability community. And I love hearing stories like that because sometimes I feel like it can be a little isolating. I think some families feel like it's a little isolating. But once you get over that hump and you start to connect with other peers and your sons and daughters start to connect with other peers, it really opens up that community. You don't feel alone anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I was looking at your website. I was like, this is really well done. We're never going to have a thing like this.
Yes. Nick the marketer, they get all the credit. I mean, truly they did a phenomenal job. It is a beautiful, easy to navigate website. It's everything we could have hoped for.
One of the things I really like about the website are their pictures there. So that can help start your navigation there. And I think the life course tools, you ever heard of those? The life course tools, which is kind of planning a little bit later in life. But they're starting to build their website and they're also starting to use pictures. So I'm seeing this theme of navigating the information, starting using pictures. And I really enjoy that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's not too much. You don't get overfilled with a bunch of words all at once. So it's really nice. So when did you guys start Families Undefined?
So we started this, started kind of the brainstorming building process in 2018. And then I believe we launched it either late 2018 or early 2019.
Yeah.
And then, have been
You guys
going
have done
since
all
then.
this in the last like 2-3 years. Wow.
COVID really helped you, just kind of buckle down and tackle some, during, quarantine is when we got our 501c3 and things like that. So, yeah.
The silver lining of the pandemic.
Right. Yes. Yes.
We're getting out of it now, so I'm glad to be back out in the community.
Yes.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit of some personal success stories of advocating for your son on his journey. Now, he's 8 years old, correct? So some personal success stories. You mentioned one with the doctor and advocating. What are some other ones there?
Yes. That was definitely the biggest one is
Really getting him in the right track.
right. As you said, our pediatrician was pediatricians are such a blessing, so I never want it to seem like, I'm trying to make it sound otherwise, but I feel like that story helped me to be able to tell other parents, you know your child better than anyone else, and you, typical child or atypical developing child, your children need you to be their advocate and need you to be their voice, and nobody is ever going to advocate for your child like you will. And don't allow yourself, like I did for so long, to be made to feel inferior, like you don't have the right to speak up for your child because somebody else knows better than you. And sometimes, of course, there are things, I can't tell you if my child has an ear infection. I need somebody to tell me that. But as a whole, who they are as a person, or even sometimes just illness or sickness, if you feel that something's not right, it probably isn't. And you are smart enough and brave enough to be able to speak up for your child, because it can be very scary to be in a room with somebody that has far more training and knowledge than you do, and to find your tiny little voice to say, I don't think you're right. It's hard. And your child needs you to do it, though. They do. So that was probably the most difficult and challenging way that we had to speak up for him. We live in such an amazing community. I don't feel that I have to be his voice in a negative way as much as some special needs parents have had to along the way. And I do feel like 2022 is an amazing time to be raising a child with a disability compared to probably when your grandparents did. And a lot of times these individuals were not even seen as individuals with value and worth, and the thought of the need for resources and the need to integrate them was not as present as it is today. We still have so far to go, right? But I am thankful that, we're at a time where we advocate more for people that have challenges.
Yeah.
So, but we, Pitt Hopkins is so rare. So we, for several years, hosted a play date for Pitt Hopkins, and it was free to the community. And we put it on where we would have bounce houses and food trucks and all face painting and all these things. And really, it was just to have people come out and learn, what is Pitt Hopkins syndrome? Why does he spit when he's angry? Why does he run away? Just brings that conversation to his peers and to the community. And we did have to stop that event for a couple years due to COVID and tried to find other ways to just be his voice. But we're constantly just trying to show the world who he is a person. And even though he has 0 words to his vocabulary, he's communicating with us all the time if we just slow down enough to try to pick up on what is he trying to tell us, because he has needs and desires just like the rest of us.
Yeah. My aunt has her own communication style. She's nonverbal. But if you spend time with her, and this is a very important thing that I do with all of her staff, if we're interviewing or hiring, I say it usually takes a good month to kind of understand what she's telling you. But if you sit down and, take patience is a big word. But if you take your time to get to know her, she will communicate with you all day long.
Yep.
She'll have you cracking up. Now she does have a tech talk, like a little thing that she can press.
Okay.
She hates it. So
John Wesley hates his too.
Does he?
I think it's just work, and he's like,
yeah. So she'll only do it. She loves coffee, and when she has a goal this year that she'll make her own coffee X amount of times during the week. So we have one of her tech talk boards is, would you hand me my K cup? Would you hand me the Keurig? That kind of stuff. She'll do the tech talk like no other. When she wants her coffee, she's all over it.
That's great.
But everything else, she's like, get that thing away from me. So it's very important that everybody that's going to be around Bridget knows that she is communicating. She's not any lesser, but you need to take your time to get to know
Absolutely.
how she is communicating there.
Yes.
I think that's very important. Follow-up question here. So the Pitt Hopkins, have you reached out to or friends with other families that who have a son or a daughter with this specific syndrome? What does that community look like?
So obviously the community is pretty small, and most of it is online. There's a support Facebook group for parents, and I follow several other families on Instagram and vice versa. Pitt Hopkins syndrome, the parents of individuals with Pitt Hopkins are referred to as a small but mighty community, because even as rare as it is, there are already 2 Pitt Hopkins clinics in the country. One's in Boston, one's in Dallas.
Yeah.
We have done amazing, and I say we, really these other moms who pioneered it have done amazing work as far as research and fundraising. So there is a research foundation for Pitt Hopkins, again, even though it is so small and rare. But so through us hosting this play date for Pitt Hopkins, the local news outlets would always report on it. So Homewood Life and the Homewood Star would put things out about this event that we would host.
Yeah.
Well, another sweet family, one in McCalla and then another one in Anniston, which is crazy for how rare it is, they both received a Pitt Hopkins diagnosis for their sons after we did. And both of them, because they had family, one has a sister that lives in Vestavia, and she remembered hearing something. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard of this syndrome, and they're just thinking, well, no way, it's so rare. And she's like, no. And then it clicked, there was a mom, that lived in Homewood that hosted this event. So they were able to Google and find our names, and we got in touch. And she and I recently actually just co-hosted a golf tournament in the fall for Pitt Hopkins. So we do have that connection. That was such a blessing to come together with another family with the exact diagnosis for a cause. So that was great.
To be within a half hour's driving distance is really cool.
Yeah.
So you guys are constantly doing like charities and stuff like that. So you guys did the golf thing. Are you guys doing that again this year?
We are going to do it again. Yes.
Yeah.
We thought it went great. It was just, it was fun. So we are going to do it again.
Heck
yes.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that there are 2 clinics in the U.S., one in Boston, one in Dallas. Have you guys had the opportunity to visit there?
So again, I feel like I keep using the word COVID. So we were intended to go the summer of 2020 to the Boston clinic, and we were not able to go because of COVID.
Yeah.
And again, last summer, same thing. Every state kind of looks differently in how they navigate COVID, as far as some having more restrictions. A big thing is that our son cannot fly because he will not. There is nothing you could do to keep a mask on him. So we have not been able to fly yet. And they did offer it virtually, but we just felt if we were going to do it, we just wanted the full in-person experience of the doctors getting to see him in person. So we're waiting till we can get on a plane and go to Boston.
Yeah, my aunt's the same way. She won't wear anything over her face. She doesn't like hats. If you try and put sunglasses on her, that's it. She's done.
Yep.
Now, what are you kind of hoping for from that visit to Boston?
Yeah, so to put it kind of plain and simple, Pitt Hopkins is so rare. And when your child receives a diagnosis for anything, medically, cognitively, developmentally, you are desperate for answers and for information. We have never gotten that because Pitt Hopkins is so rare. We're always the ones educating, and that's okay. And I have come to terms with that may be our purpose in this journey, is we may not be the ones that maybe 100 years from now, you get a diagnosis for Pitt Hopkins and there's all this information and every doctor has heard of it. We might be the part of the story where we help get there. So, his pediatrician, he's the only one with that diagnosis. His neurologist, anyone he's ever seen, they have never heard of it. So we're really showing them what it will look like. So if they ever meet another family, they can say, well, I've treated this child. So we're constantly the ones answering questions, telling them how it's playing out in his life. So all that to say, what we hope to get is just for the first time ever to have people be able to tell us something and give us information and maybe edify us in a way that will make his day-to-day easier, because that's all they do is see individuals with Pitt-Hopkins syndrome.
Yeah, so a lot of learning about the Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, education for yourselves, maybe some tinkering with the daily living or scheduling, but then also being able to properly educate the other specialists here locally that aren't familiar with the syndrome. So it's like you guys are planting a tree, hoping that in 100 years somebody will sit in the shade.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so that's amazing. That's really something to take on there. Let's get back to the website a little bit.
Yes.
I want to make sure that the community knows that this resource is out there. So what happens? How do you keep it updated, or how regularly do you guys update the website?
Yes. So obviously it's a big undertaking to update it as a whole. So we constantly encourage people, if you know of a resource that should be on our site, tell us. So anytime we get introduced to a new resource, we add it to the proper category on the website. And we also have a social media, and our social media is huge, especially for ongoing things such as events, fundraisers, camps, things that aren't necessarily stationary there all the time, like a program. So our social media is a great place to follow for current day-to-day, week-to-week things, new things that we learn about that are out there. But again, if we hear of a new resource, we will add it to our website. But I have thought to myself, okay, what's a good timeline? And I've thought about every 3 years, we need to be the same process where we started in the
Calling
beginning.
everybody.
Cold calling. Do you still exist? Is this still your number? Is this still the best email? Is this still the address? Because again, if we're not up to date and if it's not accurate, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
So.
Now it is familiesundefined.org.
It is, yes.
And Clifton, would you do me a favor and put that in the chat? familiesundefined.org. And then what are the socials there?
The socials are families_undefined. And then we have 2 Facebook pages. So we have Undefined, which is just the page where we post news, things like that. But then there's also a private group for parents,
Yep.
Undefined Birmingham, that they can ask to join. And there are other parents or individuals or just caretakers that are navigating the disability world.
Do you notice that the community interaction is a lot more on the private group?
Yes,
So people are more likely to ask questions there.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
We run a group as well for another organization, and I've noticed that as well. So people are more willing to ask those questions if they're amongst their peers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you have a few different categories on the website. I want to ask, because we're always thinking, how are we going to group our broadcasts? We have playlists on YouTube, those kinds of things. How did you guys come up with your categories?
Yeah, so kind of neat being a parent living this out in real time. Just try to ask myself logically, when I got to this stage, what would I call it? What would I be looking for? And kind of just went from there. So when he was a baby, if I had received a diagnosis when I was pregnant, what would I be looking for? And then what's the next stage? Okay, early intervention. And just kind of thinking about it throughout his lifetime, but then also other things that have their own category, services for veterans, things like that.
Yeah, it's really important to do that because you have to use the language that people are looking for.
Correct.
So being a mom and knowing what you would search for is kind of a leg up in the search game there.
Yeah.
But it's so hard because you want to say whatever they're putting into Google search, you want that to match exactly with what you have, so they
Right.
get those resources faster. Tell us some success stories of individuals that have utilized the resources through Families Undefined.
Yes. So my favorite story when I've been asked this, we have a email address that goes to all three of us. But we also have our personal phone numbers on there because sometimes you just want to talk to a person who can empathize. And we want to encourage anyone. That's what we're here for. This is what we do. So we had a lady, she is a grandmother, and she had just gotten full custody of her grandchild who has special needs. And he was turning 3 and aging out of early intervention. The parents are no longer in the picture. And she wanted to give her grandchild every available resource, best resource at his disposal. But she did not know what now. So he's 3. We know he's aging out of early intervention. Where do I go? What do I do? Every time I Google, I don't even really know how to navigate that. Websites are not super easy for me. What is next? And we were able to basically step by step kind of walk her through the process of who she needs to reach out to, how she gets him in the school system, what's next. And she sent the sweetest follow-up email weeks later that I'll never delete and I'll never forget. And I thought, this is what it's all about. And if she's the only person that benefits from this all year, it was worth it.
Yeah. And the future of that grandchild looks different because she reached out and you guys were able to help that there.
Hopefully. Absolutely.
She sounds like a saint.
Yes. She was, it made my day and was very humbling to speak to her and her love and her attitude for her grandchild. And that's a big part of this, is remembering these are people, and these are people that are grieving, and these are people that are overwhelmed. And so not to look at it, we get the question a lot of times when we have individuals who are trying to help us be more seen. And I understand the questions, because we can look these things up. What are your numbers? How many people are visiting your website? All of those things, those things are important. We're like, they are. But we also started this again with, if this helps one person, it was worth it.
Yeah, we have the numbers that we can pull through Facebook and the webpage, but when we do our reporting, our quarterly reports, really all we try and get are success stories from families or individuals, someone that's come into contact with Alabama Care and their life is better because of it. That's what we ultimately try and measure every day. So now, what does the future of Families Undefined look like?
Yes, so we were just speaking about this the other day. It is huge for us for this to grow, and we know that we need more of a workforce behind that. But my dream, my vision is for something like this to exist everywhere. I mean, in Huntsville, in Atlanta, where parents know, and maybe even just a household name, you inherit a sibling or an aunt even. It doesn't have to be a child, or even just yourself. You are navigating this journey, and the only thing that can change is the resources at hand. Again, the situation cannot change necessarily, but you can be empowered by information and by resources. And so finding out, okay, this is the path that I'm taking. I'm navigating this world. Let me jump on Undefined and see what's available to me.
Yeah, I love that. And going kind of, you said 2 things there. One was get in other states like Atlanta, and then you said also smaller like Huntsville within the same state. And it's tricky too because each state is different. It's the education system is different in each state, so the resources are different.
Yeah.
They may look different. There's different plans for each state, but to have each state's own Undefined would be really cool and help them set up their organizations and empower those other maybe moms to go through that. That'd be awesome.
I think so too.
Yeah. So is that something that you guys are going to work on like this next year or two, or what?
So when I spoke to them, I said, this summer, I have some ideas. we need to brainstorm. But again, we have to grow from within first. You know, we need more board members. We need people that are eager to grow in those directions, that are ready to tackle those things. And so that's kind of what we need to look at. How do we grow our workforce?
And kind of brave through that. You got to lead the pack there, and others will go with you. Now, what are some challenges that you're currently working on as a family and as a mom to help your son navigate? Maybe some obstacles that are coming up, transitioning to high school, after high school. Are you guys going through some of that thought process?
So we are going through a really hard period right now that's new for our family, in that we had our kids pretty back to back. So we have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5.5-year-old. So everybody was kind of in the same stage at the same time. So when everybody was little, everybody was home. We were just, we were playing outside. We were going to get ice cream in between John Wesley's therapies. But the girls were happy to come along to that because pretty easily you could communicate to them what we're doing and why. There is a huge communication barrier there with him, even though as his mom, I understand so much of what he's trying to tell me, but it can also be hard for me to communicate things back to him. So we are going through a period where the girls have all these desires to do these activities, right? Gymnastics, tennis, all of these things, and basketball. Well, gyms are overwhelming to him a lot of times. They're loud. He doesn't like the way they feel. He doesn't like the way they echo. So he's miserable the whole time we're there. So then it's, well, do only one of us take our daughter and miss her game? Or do we make him endure? So that has been hard. And what's been especially hard is his needs are pretty severe. Like he has just really started with where there's some receptive communication. So receptive communication would be like, lift your arm or clap your hands. There's some, but not a lot. So the activities he can do are very limited. And the one activity that he still has not been able to resume because of COVID. He can't keep a mask on. So they haven't, allowed him to be back.
Yeah.
So we're navigating this world of, what do we do? What's fair? What's right? Do we make him endure and miss out on the girls? And will the girls grow up and feel like they always had to sacrifice? There aren't enough activities for him that he can fully engage in. So it's a whole different world for us right now.
Yeah. Is the possibility of a caregiver on the table?
So that's something that we definitely talk about. I mean, yes, it's expensive.
Yeah.
We love our state. We love where we live, but insurance is a little more limited here for disability resources than it is in other states. So definitely that's something we're going to have to do. But it's hard too when you have a nonverbal family member.
Yeah.
It's a whole other level of trust. If I leave my girls with a babysitter and something isn't just right, they can tell me that. He can't tell me that.
Yep.
And so it's hard. I think I'll have to mentally and emotionally get there. And the screening process will be grueling. We have to financially get there, all of those things. I mean, it's things, a lot of people don't think about, like, oh, well, a caregiver. It's like, well, I mean, that costs money, one, and then who,
Yeah.
it'd be so hard for me to find someone that I would feel comfortable him being alone with all the time.
I feel like sometimes the universe conspires, like in a good way,
Yes.
and that people come into your life when they're meant to. But I will say, when you find somebody that really clicks with your son, try everything to make them feel part of the family. One of the biggest success stories for my aunt, and living her great life, is she's had Bobby. Bobby's been with her for 15 years. Bobby considers her like a daughter. She really cares about her. I care about Bobby, so we try and create that family atmosphere. But I think that's a huge part of that success story that not a lot of people talk about. But you kind of have to plan for, down the road there.
Absolutely.
I'd like to talk a little bit. You mentioned his sisters, your other children. What's that sibling relationship like?
Yes. So our girls have very different personalities. So our middle child is a huge nurturer. So this morning, And I guess you can't really appreciate this story without background. He is very non-compliant a lot of times. So I park in the garage. You have to go down the stairs to get into my vehicle. He is 8 years old. My husband is 6'3". He's definitely on the trajectory of that height. So he's tall. He's probably 80 pounds. And he is very strong. He does not know his own strength. So I'm trying to get all their Valentine's stuff. You know, today's Valentine's Day. And so get all the Valentine's stuff together, and we're kind of pushing it for time. And so I go down to the garage to put things in the car, and I had already asked the girls to get in the car, and I thought, okay, I'll go back and get John Wesley and put him in the car. He was already in a seat, buckled. I mean, she's probably half his size. And I said, did you put him in the car? And she said, I did. She said it was really hard, but I knew we were in a hurry. She is 7 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And so they definitely are learning that empathy and that nurturing kind of naturally in a way. I love that they'll have that, and hopefully they'll see others and see struggles that maybe other people wouldn't pick up on and be a voice to the voiceless. But so she and he have a really great dynamic, and then my youngest is a little more feisty, you know, and so they kind of have almost that traditional sibling back and forth. But then you see little things, you know, a couple months ago, he likes to play in the bathtub, and she went in there and washed his hair, and she's 5. I mean, so you see them kind of start to learn, he needs us. He's my big brother, but he needs me to help take care of him.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I feel like the nurturing thing I see in my family. So Bridget's sister, one of them, was a special ed teacher, went into the field,
Oh, wow.
you know, recently retired, but to have that nurturing, you know, capacity growing up there. And I've, you know, I hear some of it. My mom has, you know, horror stories of being like, you know, I wasn't given time, those kinds of things, because very close to being born together like that. And it's tough. You know, I know my grandparents did everything for each one of them, but it's like no matter what you do, you're going to have something to point your finger at your
Yes.
parents for.
That they won't understand till much, much later.
Yeah. And then even then it's tough to kind of let go.
That's true.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that you do in the community, some volunteering work. You also said you set up the, you know, golf outings, fundraising, stuff like that. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So it may be a coping mechanism, but I've kind of always been like this. If you give me a problem, you know, it might take a second to be sad, and then it's like, okay, what are we going to do? You know, how are we going to make this situation better, if not for ourselves, for somebody else? So I like to work. It makes me feel productive. And so when John Wesley got his diagnosis, I knew, okay, I can't sit back. You know, we have to be active, and we have to make a difference for him and for other people. And so that's kind of where Undefined grew. But then also these events for Pitt Hopkins, you know, I want people to learn about Pitt Hopkins. I want people to know who he is and who future individuals with Pitt Hopkins are. But then I feel we have been so blessed by so many people that have given to us or been a support system for us, that I also want to give back to those places. So that I mentioned the Bell Center early on, and again, that was a lifeline for us. So there is an organization called the Service Guild, and it's essentially a volunteer program that solely benefits the Bell Center. And so I joined that. This is my first year as a Service Guild member. It's a 5-year commitment. You volunteer in the classroom, which is the absolute best part of it, to get to work with these kids. And then you also take part in any of the fundraisers that benefit the Bell Center. And then I recently got involved with an organization called Best Buddies. Best Buddies is incredible. So it is a nationwide organization. They do so much, but one of the main things that they do that I just love is they develop peer relationships. So they, in true friendships, it's more than even just kind of somebody to mentor you. They want true friendships between an individual with disabilities and their peers. And so I recently, they host a walk, and I recently was asked to be the marketing and PR chair for their Alabama walk. So I'm doing that. That's in April. But my husband and I both, he's on the junior board for the Bell Center. we don't want any of this to be in vain. You know, we believe that this was put on our plates for a purpose, and I'm not going to sit down and not make the most of it.
Yeah, and to give back to those organizations is amazing. So your plate is pretty full.
It
sounds
full.
like you've got a lot out there right now.
It is full.
But to be in the community there, you start making new friends, new relationships, and it helps grow the community overall.
You do. And I think if people see me and they know that I'm John Wesley's mom, well, they're also getting to know John Wesley.
Yeah.
And I'm not always going to be here. And so if I can build that community for him while I'm here and have him be almost a fixture in his community where people know who he is, what his obstacles are, hopefully I can do that for him in the years that I have.
Yeah, that natural support network. We have Kim Spangler, who's done a number of broadcasts and is going with the Colby Act right now, just trying to get some guardianship laws reversed or, changed or have an option for others in the state of Alabama. So a lot of times guardianship will be assigned like at 19 when you're getting out of the school system. And her thing is, that's a little restrictive. You can definitely have a support network of people that are very familiar with your son or daughter and care about them. And he or she can keep their own guardianship and rely on that support network for questions, that they have throughout their life, whether that's work, play, church, anything along those lines. It's pretty cool stuff there. Now, speaking about work, you think John Wesley, does he want to work?
So
he's still young. He's 8 years old.
He is still very young. So I think I mentioned earlier, his diagnosis is pretty severe, and that can present an extra challenge. There are a lot of things that are available to the disability community that he cannot participate in that a lot of individuals with a disability could. So he is fully nonverbal, and even though most individuals with Pitt-Hopkins never walk, he is fully mobile, but he doesn't have any real independent skills. He can't feed himself with utensils. He can't dress himself. He's not potty trained. He can't put his shoes on. He can't brush his teeth. All of those things. And fine motor is pretty difficult for him. Even some gross motor skills, he's getting so much better. But as I say this, you ask that question and almost inside I laugh like, oh, he's not going to work. But I will tell you that child is amazing. And he always teaches me, why would I ever doubt him? Because he is incredible. I mean, he does things every day that I would have told you in the past he could never do that. And it's just me and my weakness limiting him when really he has no limits. And I just forget that all the time.
I love that, because we talk sometimes and I mention, putting limiting beliefs on your children or others, and they'll surprise you if you give them the opportunity.
Absolutely. And I am guilty of that for sure, but they will.
I think we all are in some ways, whether that's, whatever we're doing there. So I want to talk a little bit about upcoming events that you would recommend anybody in the community get involved in here in the next few months.
So one big event, I'm so glad you asked about this, that Undefined is actually hosting that is so beneficial to parents. So we're putting on a special needs estate planning seminar. It's actually going to be at the Bell Center. They're letting us use their multi-purpose room. There is a sweet, wonderful altruistic attorney. She works for Carney and Dye, and she specializes in special needs estate planning, and she actually has a daughter with a diagnosis, and it's kind of gotten her passionate to be an advocate for this community. So she is volunteering her time to speak, and really this is huge. This is time you would have to normally pay for by the hour, even to have this conversation. So she gets up there and she goes into, a special needs trust. How much money is your child allowed to have before they lose their qualification for disability? What's a 529? What's an ABLE account? I mean, she goes into all of this, and then you can ask questions. So that'll actually be next Thursday, February 24th. It starts at 6. It is free to register, but you don't even have to register. You can absolutely just show up. and it will be at the Bell Center in Homewood.
Now, how did you and Mrs. McInerney meet?
Okay, so when we first started Undefined, we were like, we would get on the ground, and we still try to do this and need to do this more, but we would interview places so we could post some of that on social media. And one of the places we got connected with was Carney and Di, and she ended up joining their team and reached out and wanted to meet. And she is just so passionate about this community that she was like, what can we do?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is her idea because she is a rock star for sure.
She's awesome. We've had her on a broadcast,
Oh,
I think,
you have?
5 times in the last year.
Okay, she is incredible.
She's
yes,
awesome.
we love her. And she is constantly emailing me like, you guys need to get in touch with these people. And we do. Like, she's like, you guys need to meet, you need to meet this person. I mean, we love her. Yeah.
I remember when she came on there and introduced herself, and we just kind of hit it off on the broadcast, and she's done, a number since then.
Yes.
So I'm very fortunate to get to know her.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody is really wanting to help support Families Undefined, how could they go about doing that? Maybe through donations or...
Donations are great. The biggest thing when we do ask for help, anyone that wants to volunteer for content, I mean, we live in such a technological world. That's really how people are getting their information. And as I age and get less technologically savvy, I realize that we have a huge need for that. We don't put out as much content as we could or should because I feel like we're all a little bit behind in that. And so if there's a college student, anyone, I mean, of any age that just has a passion for this community or maybe for our purpose, that's like, I'd love to help out one day a week. I mean, content creation is huge for us.
And that's being on the socials, you mean?
Being on the socials, we have so much, again, because Birmingham is such a great place for disability resources. There is so much information. It's just getting it out there.
Yeah. And what type of content are you looking for? So maybe someone's thinking, I might have a day a week, but I'm wondering what type of content they would.
So sharing about local fundraisers, programs going on, the Exceptional Foundation summer camp registration is coming up and there's a deadline, getting that out to the community, those type of things, and just, making sure that we're getting that out there as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. So if anyone's interested in helping out and donating some time and getting the word out, it sounds like Mrs. Holley would love to talk with you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Her number is on the website that we put in the chat there. And it is a 501c3, so it is a nonprofit. All your donations, go directly as a tax write-off.
Yep.
And there's an option to donate on the webpage.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, as we kind of come to a close here, I always like asking, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think an individual or a family member could benefit from hearing?
I really don't think so. Not that comes to mind. All the questions were so great.
What would you say to a mom watching?
Oh, you've got this. You have got this.
Yeah.
And you are not alone. That's the biggest thing is when you're navigating this in the beginning, you feel like you're on an island. You do. You feel that nobody can understand this and empathize and be there for you in the way that you fully need, because it's different for every person, every different family member connected. But you are not alone, and there is a community. Truly, there's a community out there, and they want to be connected with you.
Yeah, it's a very powerful community there, very arms wide open, welcoming, but you got to make the first step and reach out. Mm-hmm. And one of those steps could be reaching out to familiesundefined.org on the website, and then the personal phone numbers there if you want to talk today. So thank you, Mrs. Holley, for spending the morning with us. We really appreciate
thank you for
it.
having me. Yes, of course.
And at this point, we'll kind of look at our respective cameras, and we will say, see you guys later in the week. And Clifton will go ahead and take us out. And I'll always wait a few minutes here just to make sure that we are not live.